conquer, and we're going to take some. Is that understood? Yes, sir. That's what we're going to do, sweetheart. We are going to go and get some. All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! What are you? What are you?
The Exceptional Parent Magazine March issue covers helpful information on hearing, vision, and speech impairments. As always, there is a special military section as well. Sign up to read for free and receive the free monthly newsletter at epmagazine.com.
Monotony. It comes in all shapes and sizes. Dull, tedious, just plain boring. But what is this? A contender, perhaps? Something unboring by the looks of it. Jabs right at dull, an uppercut to tedium, something that keeps you on your toes, keeps your head on a swivel, a knockout punch to your old, boring workouts. Welcome to Fight Camp.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
I remember a time when I was in a not so good place, and these games and these activities and being able to come and have the camaraderie that we have here, it makes me feel like I'm not alone. There are people here that have been through what I've been through. It makes me feel like I don't know, I'm part of something great.
Just let yourself go. Give it a try.
How's it going?
Going well. It's that new guy energy.
Oh, he's back. That's the fourth time he's done that.
Is he peeking or probing?
Speaking with serious intent to probe.
Alpha 2, we might have guys starting to move on our position.
Copy, we're getting a buildup of activity here too.
Yeah, I definitely see weapons at this point.
Yeah, we have definite massing.
We're seeing activity converging to your north and south.
This is Frogman 6 Romeo. We need evac at our last known position. We have severely wounded.
Who's the severely wounded?
It's not you.
Is it me? Who is it?
No, it's not you.
No, is it?
Copy 1, we're in contact 2.
You coming to you or you coming to us?
Stand by. We'll let you know when we're inbound.
Let's move!
Here's the plan.
TA 5 minutes, over.
The scouts are gonna lead us out, and I'm bringing up the rear. Pop smoke.
Smoke out?
We are all coming back.
OP1, they are en route to you.
3 minutes out! 3 minutes! Eyes on me and only me. Has anyone looked at you?
Claymore rock me, dude.
2 minutes out! 2 minutes!
Where are you guys?
Look for the blood and the smoke.
Multiple bad guys trying to get to our position.
Inbound! Inbound! Find cover!
1 minute out!
We have enemy on our building and all surrounding buildings.
Roger that, stand by. Going hot.
You gotta get ready, man. This is gonna hurt.
On my count. 1, 2, 3.
Hey, you might be wondering why I'm staying here at Massasoit Community College for this show on April 26th. You could say that April 26, 2016 is truly the birthday of Oscar Mike Radio, because this is where I met Keith Hayes at Sinister One Productions. Here's where I said, you know, I can make my start, and I believed Oscar Mike Radio would become a thing, and now 9 years later, here we are. And I'm kind of feeling all this out, but I talked to Richard Sherman, who did a photography book called Never Home. And, you know, I was going to do this earlier in the year, then in March, and it just, when you look at this, and I go through these pages, and I see some of the images he's created, what I feel is a connection with somebody who, with a camera and a lens and an idea, did his own thing like I did Oscar Mike Radio. And I just felt like a standard show wouldn't cut it. I don't know why. I look at this book and I realize that he has captured parts of history that are forgotten, or maybe not forgotten, but not really in the minds of people. And you can't help but read this book, look at the pictures, and understand, you know, how we got where we are today. And so I'm feeling this out. Richard, I know I said I would have this on earlier in the year, but the more I looked at the book, the more I watched our rough edits of our show, I'm like, this deserves something special. So I think I'm going to do something going forward for April 26th, because yes, July is when Oscar Mike Radio formally launched its first show, but right here at Massasoit Community College is where it was born, where the idea really said, you know, I can do this. And I wanted to mark April 26th going forward as a very special occasion. So I'm figuring out something, but for right now, Richard, I want you to know that, you know, this book is more than just a typical author book, where you just talk to the author, rep the book, get it out there, Amazon link, goodbye. This has had an impression upon me, and I wanted to do it justice. I wanted to make this special. And your work, your story, your efforts to keep these memories alive will always stick with me. Thank you so much. I don't know, I'll call it something going forward, but maybe for now it's the first, you know, Mission Flight Award number 0. I don't know, but know from me to you, Richard, that there's a kinship there. Thank you for your patience, and please, please watch this show and help me celebrate Richard's amazing achievement for Mission Flight. Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubazoo Network. You can find out more on hubazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asak of Asak Real Estate, and my supporters, Cason Shaving Company and Exceptional Parent Magazine. Thank you. You know, I love talking about books, interesting books, and the authors behind them. And I have a Navy veteran who has a very interesting project he'd like to share with us. It's about our World War II veterans. So without any further delay, Richard Sherman, Navy brother, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio. So glad to have you.
Travis, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on board.
Just a little housekeeping, folks. I just want to give a quick shout out to H Train from Military Broadcast Radio for this shirt. I feel like a different guy. Yes, I'm still OMR, but I'm part of the MBR family, and so just H Train, thank you so much. I looked at your website and then your book and what you had going on, and it's extremely interesting to me because you took a different viewpoint of World War II, and that's the good stuff, and it's all good. But before we get into that good stuff, you actually joined the Navy and did all that and saw us Marines. Kind of tell us, Richard, what your Navy career was like.
Yeah, it was a great experience for me. I loved particularly the active duty element of it. So shortly before graduating from high school, I thought about joining the Marine Corps. So I had the Marine Corps recruiter at the house and knocking on the door, and it's like putting blood in the water in front of a shark. So that I had to call off that. But I was very interested in joining the Marine Corps coming out of high school, and I thought about it and reflected on it for a long time. My father was a Navy veteran from the Korean conflict, and we've had family and uncles and relatives throughout various services. And so, the service was never really far from my mind. And I decided to go on to college. And just before graduating from college, I signed the papers about a semester before to join the Navy and to go to their officer candidate school. So that's I had a semester left, signed the papers, and classed up in August of 1989, just a few years ago. And off I went, and the rest is history, as they say. Was commissioned in November. Had the great privilege and honor my father-in-law, who was at the time a captain, and he ultimately completed his career as a two-star reserve admiral, the highest. Well, there's one three-star. I think there's only a handful of two stars, but very very successful career for him on active duty and in the reserve. So it was a great honor to have him commission me. We've lost him several years ago now, but that was a memorable event in my life. And then I went to Naval Intelligence Officer School, and and then off to the fleet, and just trying not to make a mess of things as a junior officer, and arrived at my first squadron. I had the opportunity. I'd done pretty well at Intel school, but I had this, since I almost joined the Marine Corps, I went a little bit of a different way than most Intel guys, most and gals. They usually go to the aviation squadrons to start, but I had a real passion to go with the Marines, and had a wonderful experience in Tactical Air Squadron 21, which attached to the Fibron, the amphibious squadron, and we deployed. I guess I don't know, Travis, maybe 6-8 weeks after arriving at my first tour of duty. We were heading afloat down to Morehead City to pick up the Marines, and heading over to Desert Shield, and came back and then went back over for Desert Storm. First tour, of course, was involved in the war, and then the second tour I was at a fighter squadron, a tremendous job, which was an adversary squadron. So we had some of the top pilots in the Navy that were flying as adversary or enemy tactics.
Okay.
And it was driven by a lot of intelligence. We had electronic pods, and they would go and fly missions so that the fleet was ready for enemy doctrine if they should encounter them in their flights. And then I was in a long-term relationship with my fiance, and she had graduated, and we had discussed future, and it wasn't really the right thing for us. Although I loved active duty, it wasn't really the right thing for us, and so I left active duty, and I went into the reserves, went to Georgetown, got an MBA, and returned to the civilian world.
When you made the decision to return to the civilian world, was it a gradual transition out of the military back to being a civilian? Was being part of an MBA program kind of an aid, assistance in helping you make that mental switch, or was it just an abrupt stop?
Well, great. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, right? 100%. That's a difficult transition, and the business school was a soft landing, right? It's not like we were going into the office every day. We had quite a number And even to this day, a number of my friends were Army or Air Force that were in the MBA program. So yeah, it was a soft landing. That stark reality came, I guess, after a business school and adjusting to the corporate. And so, but in terms of the personal adaptation to the civilian world, that was a great um, transition for me, being in groups and communities, right? Like, yeah, I think for me, my impression is that the civilian world, really emphasizes your individual performance. And here I was, having played high school and college sports and being part of the team, and mission. That's the thing that's difficult. I think when we leave is that we gain freedom. Excuse me, Travis, we gain freedom, but we lose mission. And so being in the MBA program at Georgetown, it was all group learning. We did group projects, and having that experience really, really helped also on the, not just the professional side, but on the individual and the personal side to transition to the civilian world.
Gain freedom, lose purpose.
Lose mission.
Lose mission. Gain freedom, lose mission. I think for a lot of us, that sums up our experience very well. I mean, yeah, we have this freedom. We don't have someone telling us what to do every minute of the day, but you do lose that mission focus, mission purpose. And that's where a lot of the problems come in. So you have your MBA, you're starting your family, starting your life. Were you always a photographer? Because the book, ladies and gentlemen, is Never Home, Remembering the Military Heroes Who Never Returned, by Richard Sherman. I'll have the link in the Oscar Mike Radio show post. And it's a lot of imagery about the timeline of these, wars and conflicts. So before we get into that, though, did you start working with photography as a hobby? How'd that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a hobby. My father was a amateur photographer. He built his own dark room. So, cameras were always part of our home. And, it's an interesting thing when I reported to my new command, and then, like I said, 6 or 8 weeks later, I'm heading off. I had a chat with mom and dad, say goodbye and head off. I said, asked my dad, I remember if he had any advice, right? Because he was in Korea, and he had some losses aboard his ship. And he gave me no advice, but he gave me his single lens reflex film camera to take with me. Now, that's kind of a weird thing to say in the military, because, Marines don't have room for enough food, let alone anything else. But, in the Navy, we have coffee and we have showers. We have
I was told that Marines are just cargo to you guys. That's all we are. So stuff them in the hold.
There's always a joke that they're ballast, but leaving that aside, I have tremendous respect for the Marine Corps, as I do for all the services. But I almost joined the Marine Corps, so I have tremendous respect. It's never easy to do it the right way, and I have a real respect for them. And so, yeah. So anyway, I headed off, and after getting the Marines in Morehead City, we embarked. Was it 24 or 26 MU? I can't remember it right now, but we did a missile shot on our training exercises over, and I had my dad's single lens reflex, and of course, as a lot of if you weren't on duty, you didn't have some specific. I was up on the flag was there, so I was working for the flag, so I was up on the bridge there, and leaned my camera up and had all the settings correct. It was all manual, and the missile shot, and scared the hell out of me. And I had the shutter halfway down, and I fired it. So 8.5 months later, we come home. I drop it off for development, and don't you know, it's a perfect shot.
Really?
The missile is smoke. I should dig that out here. The smoke is coming out. The missile's maybe 10 meters out of the box, perfectly clear. And I think for that, it was like, wow, photography can do things that the human eye can't do. Anyway, always been a hobby. After the MBA school, worked in Wall Street and financial services jobs, which I enjoyed for a period of time. But also continued to shoot images. And my wife, as a gift, would get me mentorships with various professional photographers. So the interest continued to build, and that's where photography has been in my life.
You work in financial services. You're building your photography craft. Where did the idea, I read in your website, I'll have that link in the Oscar Mike Radio show post about where it started. But even so, you have so many things to photograph, so many stories to tell. What caused you to visit not just the World War II cemeteries, because that's what the book really covers, is the true human cost of these conflicts, but you also went back to World War One, which in a way is really regretful that we have forgotten a lot of what that war was about. But what caused you to say, you know what, I think there's a story here I want to try using my camera to tell?
Yeah, I think there's a mosaic of influences with that, right? Having come from a family that had served in the military, having myself served in the military, we're always aware from our very first days in boot camp of those who have gone before us, the great traditions of the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, whatever, the Army, and those who served with great valor and distinction. And so they're never really far from our mind. And I think just like we are here today, those who are still serving today and are in harm's way are never really far from our mind. So, I think, as I mentioned, graduate school, a couple of good friends that were Air Force and Army, and that's it becomes part of your life. The frequency may change as you become a civilian, but it's just a part of your life. And so, I had, after working about 16 years as a analyst on Wall Street, I decided to make a change, and we can go into that if you want to in a bit. But I started to study photography. My wife and I had a conversation. She was having a successful career. She had the healthcare coverage, and she's has continued to do very well in her career. And so, I had this opportunity to do something that I was really passionate about, and that was, photography. And photography is, the word photography means writing with light. You're writing. It's a language. And I teach photography for the Princeton Photo Workshop in New Jersey. And I always emphasize this. We're really, certainly photographs are, hey, it's pretty, I was there, here's the thunderstorm or the sunset. But when we really get serious about photography, we understand it's a language unto itself. And so, for those who have gone and visited any of these cemeteries, I lived, by the way, during graduate school, right across the street from Arlington National Cemetery. So I was there working out on the adjacent base as a reservist in the gym. And then, everybody who came into town, we were at Arlington, and what a important reminder of sacrifice that location is. But yeah, so I think that was, I guess, also part of the influence, is being so close to Arlington. And I got out of the Wall Street job, studied photography with the New York Institute of Photography. And I was just trying to say, as a teacher, I tell people, look, it's writing with light. It's more than just documentary, or I saw this. And I think that when you go to speak to somebody who's gone to Normandy or any of these cemeteries, and you ask them, or they ask you, what was it like? And we tend to fumble for words. It's like, it was, I mean, it's just, we use almost basic words like amazing, right? I mean, that almost sounds like a teenage, it was like amazing kind of thing. And we just struggle for words to describe it. But photography, right? Photography is this interesting thing that we can, instead of me putting words in your mind, I can put an image and you can interpret it for yourself. And so I think photography,
1,000 words,
right?
Phenomenal.
And for you, when you look at the images, they mean slightly different things to you, or there's triggers to you, right? And like, one of the first cemeteries I went was a World War I cemetery, not to get babble too much, but it was the Somme American Cemetery. And one of the first headstones I came across was a gentleman named Clyde Sherman. I'm not related to Clyde Sherman. I don't know anything about Clyde Sherman, but I was immediately taken aback. Like, here's my last name in a World War I cemetery. What was this guy like? And so there, in the images, there are things that based on your experience in life, based on whether it be military or civilian experiences, personal or interpersonal experiences, there are things that mean things to you in a way that certain words really can't convey what that intimate personal meaning in the way that photography is. Anyway, study photography. 2017, I started working with Mary Virginia Swanson, who is a very well-known professional in the industry that really has the name and the reputation to help photographers create books. That's what she does. In 2017, we started to formulate a plan to go take this journey of gratitude that I wanted to do. And I can tell you where that journey of gratitude started in a minute, but take this journey of gratitude, work with the American Battle Monuments Commission, an amazing organization that we have, a government organization of, I think, maybe 500 people. 400 are foreign nationals, and almost all the rest of the Americans are overseas, as I understand it. But they were incredibly supportive of this. So we started to formulate the plan to go and take this journey of gratitude and bring everybody that I could with me by taking these images and taking my camera gear along.
You start working with somebody. So where did the seed for this really germinate and take root that you said, you know what, I'm going to make this a project. I need help to do it. But what was the catalyst for that happening? Because this is not just, hey, we're going to go over and shoot someone's, take pictures, don't shoot cats, but take pictures of someone's cats, for example, or take some fall scenery. This is, you're putting effort, money, and time to go back and make this history come alive. So what caused you to say, you know what, this is something I do really want to do, and I'm willing to put the effort in?
Yeah, I think the word you use there is perfect, a seed, because it was planted around 2007. So really 10 years before I got started on the project. I was still working a financial services job. I didn't know that it would lead to this. But in 2007, I got into a cab in Vancouver, Canada. And the cab driver and I started chatting. And it turned out that he was a Ukrainian soldier from World War II. And over the course of a short 25-minute cab ride, it changed really my perception of the fallen and the need to remember them. And he explained, here he was as a young man, right now at this stage, he's probably in his early mid 80s. But as a young man, he's fighting the horrific enemy in front of him, and uncertain about his future. And behind him is the Russian Red Army that is beating the Ukrainian soldiers, or starving them, or heaven forbid they take a step back or consider retreat, they just get shot. And so he told me, of some pretty tough stories about that experience. You didn't really have any allies in any way that you learned, any direction that you looked. And here he is, and is fighting his own land, really just fighting for survival with his mates. And almost like a miracle, suddenly American troops start arriving. And it was even in his 80s, right? We have the luxury of history now and communications and the internet to understand kind of the context of things, of global events. And here it was very personal for him as a young man. All he knows is there's bullets flying. I'm just trying to survive. And out of nowhere, the American troops arrive, and they fight next to him and help him and his fellow soldiers defeat fight against the Germans and ultimately defeat them. And it was stunning. He was saying, I could never understand why you boys, not obviously you, the general term, would leave the safety of your homes thousands of miles away and come and fight next to us. It just never made sense. And then in the backdrop of all the violence and horror of war, he also went on to explain that he would only receive, the Ukrainians would only receive rations every maybe 4 or 5 days. So it was cold, they were hungry, they were afraid, and the American troops, not only did they come thousands of miles, but they also had rations every day. And I remember his sentence, here we were fighting in our own land, and we wouldn't eat for 4 or 5 days, and the Americans had food every day. And it was he was still kind of mind blown by it. And against that backdrop of that violence, the American troops would share their rations with the Ukrainians, and it just meant everything to him. So the war becomes, obviously being in the military and serving the military, you have a knowledge, but it became very personal now for me. Like, that I could relate to that. And that seed, as you mentioned, was planted not probably between 2007, 2017, certainly dozens of times, maybe 100 or more times I told that story, and I would reflect on it all the time. I left Wall Street, built some skills, went to the New York Institute of Photography, hired some mentors to criticize my work and help me get better. And I reached a stage where I thought I was capable of using photography as a language and not just photography as a documentation tool. And that's what happened in starting in 2018 when we started making these trips.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm with Navy veteran Richard Sherman, who wrote Never Home, Remembering Military Heroes Who Never Returned. And I go through this, and my first thought was, Richard, I read the book The Rifle by Andy Biggio, and that is primarily World War II veterans who survived, came home, and he tells their story. They signed the M1 Garand, and that's how their story is captured. But then I'm looking through the website and some of the images there, and I do understand that you're building a tapestry that we can visualize what these people went through and what was left behind when they didn't come home. So with that being said, you get trained, you get some mentorship, you get a team behind you, you get some leadership to kind of guide you. Take me through the first cemetery you went to, and what was it like starting to actually capture, this idea? Please.
Wow, brilliant question, right? I mean, you embark on this journey and you have a goal in mind, and along the way, you feel like you're going to bring something back and share it, and you're going to help other people remember, and you're transformed by that journey yourself, right? And so the first cemetery I went to was the Somme American Cemetery. I mentioned Clyde Sherman earlier. It was Memorial Day weekend in 2018. My wife actually accompanied me on the trip. She wanted to go as well. Like I said, her father was a two-star, and she has been a tremendous supporter of this. I mean, I think she's even more passionate, if that's even possible, than I am. She's always out telling this story. But we went to the Somme American Cemetery. We also went to Normandy and several others on that trip. But it was Memorial Day weekend, and we got there early thanks to the American Battle Monuments Commission. They put me in touch with the superintendent, and they allowed me to come in early and get some images. And so there's a ceremony about to happen. The flag bearers, the drapeau, the French call, they come in and they're dressed all in their uniforms. And if you've not been to, for those of your listeners not been to one of these cemeteries, they are immaculately maintained. The grass is the same level throughout. You won't find anything on the ground that's not supposed to be there. The headstones are etched and updated, and they're washed and kept clean. It's just extraordinary what a great organization that the ABMC is, and what they do for those who have given everything. So I come in, I start taking the images. I walk past Clyde Sherman's headstone, had to take some pictures there. The hair on the back of my neck stood up when I had that experience. And probably the most moving experience is the first division, the Army's first division, in their I guess I would call it their ceremonial gear with the doughboy hats. They come in and they bring the American flag in, and the Somme is an emotionally accessible, a good place to start because it's a smaller cemetery as opposed to, say, like 9,700 roughly interred in Normandy. It's much more reasonable in size to get a hold of yourself and get your vision about what you want to do as a photographer. But as the ceremony was getting ready to start, there's a little village up on the hill. Now, the Somme is in a very rural area. It's not a suburban setting. It's a rural area. It's covered with farmland around it. But there's a little tiny village, a little town just on top of the hill overlooking the cemetery with a church spire, steeple sticking up. And don't you know, I look up as I'm working, and the townspeople come streaming down, right? They're dressed to the nines, right? And there's an image or two in the book there. I always remember this woman in this beautiful pink dress, and the men are wearing suits. It's like a wedding. It's like a funeral. It's like people are dressing up, and these are the French folks that are coming to remember now 100 years later the sacrifices of the American GI and what they did for them. I don't want to go into history, but the Somme, followed Verdun, and between those two conflicts in World War I, in 1916, before the American Expeditionary Force came, in 1916, those were bloody battlegrounds. some roughly 1.2 million casualties on both sides between Verdun and the Somme in 1916, which lasted, from I don't know, March or so to August, September. Some over a million casualties, 1.2 million casualties between the Allies and their enemies there. And so the arrival of the American troops in 1918 and the pushing out of the German forces is well remembered in rural France.
I have it here, and I'll have a picture of it in the website post. But you've gone to a lot of cemeteries, and each cemetery is the same in the fact that we have the deceased there, but each cemetery is different. Just out of curiosity, do you feel anything and what I mean by that is, you walk into one of these cemeteries and you realize what this means and what's there. Does that give you a feeling that you go with when you try to take your photography, or is this, and don't take this the wrong way, is this more clinical? I'm here to try to capture the story in the framework I've created.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, a tough one to answer. I think it's how you feel, right? It inspires your photography, because if we abstract this,
okay,
a headstone, there's only two. There's crosses and there's stars of David. And at a certain stage, it becomes difficult to become creative or inspired when you're in your sixth year and you're on your third continent and you've been on 7 other trips. This is your 8th trip, right? But it becomes difficult to be inspired. So you have to be in touch with that. You have to be in touch with the human side of this. And so the book, actually, the structure of the book, there's 3 chapters in the book, is designed to take you on the emotional journey that I took, or that I think anybody takes going to the cemetery. And that emotional journey is very important in helping you. Being emotional helps you be inspired and and seeing better as a photographer. But so chapter 1, when we walk into the cemetery, whether it be the Somme or Normandy or Henri Chapelle in Belgium or Flanders Field in Belgium or Luxembourg, where General Patton's laid to rest, there's generally this very positive feeling. I don't know if there's a word for it. Honor, respect, glory. Again, that's why we have photography, because it's hard to describe it in words. But there's just this positive thing. Like, this is when the America sons and daughters did everything they could to save the world from tyranny, and they really did. And so you feel like, you feel good, lack of a better term, going in there. And so the images in the first chapter are very pretty, right? Soldiers in uniforms, the drapeau and the flag bearers, the beautiful sunny skies, the beautiful trees and summery look of the cemeteries. And then after we go through the gates, we typically walk among the headstones. That's what the name of the second chapter is. And that's where we walk in front and, oh, there's Clyde Sherman, same last name. I wonder what he's like. My son's name, I don't have a son, but my son's name's Robert. Oh, I wonder what his story was, what his goals and aspirations were. So when we walk among the headstones, we start to wonder about the individuals and their families. And so that's where chapter 2 brings in the 54 biographies from World War I and World War II of our fallen, to try to represent the more than 207,000 individuals memorialized across these 23 World War I and World War II cemeteries, just a small sampling of it. But I tried really hard to provide a brief vignette about them. They were about to get married. They were a twin. They were a Native American and would send money home to the family where times were tough in Oklahoma. Things that would reflect the individual as in addition to their military service, so that we can relate to them. Remember, many of your listeners are veterans or come from military families or maybe even active duty. But there are 30 million veterans and active duty folks, roughly, in a country of 330 million people.
Yeah, it's small.
Right. So, I wanted to also make it relatable, so I included not only the infantrymen and the artillerymen and the fighter pilot, but also people who served in other jobs such as nursing and doctors and chaplains and ambulance drivers and a variety of different occupations within the military. Anyway, chapter 2, we walk through the headstones, and then invariably we go deeper into the cemetery, and then we have to make our way back out, and that's when I think the darkness starts to hit us because say at Normandy we walk after row after row after row of headstones, look as far left and as far right as we want to. When we walk down that center column, all you see is headstones. And so that there's a moment, I think, for all of us where the toll on the families and on the individuals becomes very palpable for us emotionally. And so chapter 3 is Taps is the name of the chapter, and the images become progressively darker, less sunlight, more shadow, fog, rain, ice, fallen leaves, just to reflect that feeling. So embracing that emotion, to answer your question, was key to getting the images and and those images to be as expressive as I wanted them to be.
Let's go back a little bit, because the images in the book have to be, I don't know, I'm not a photographer, but I've seen photographers work, and I've tried doing my own type of photography and video work. What you show in the book is a small representation of the number of images you had to take and work with. So, and if you haven't done that before, you can't really appreciate, one, it can be tedious, but two, there can be angst of, which image do I choose? So kind of take me through that process, because I have to feel that what we see in the book is only a drop in the bucket of what's actually recorded.
Well, yeah, I could talk to you all day. Yeah, absolutely. You must have been a photographer at some point. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, maybe it's less than 1%. So it is a long process, right? And I will tell you, in 2023, I went overseas. Well, between 2022 and 23, I tried to get snow, right? So I was going over there because I wanted that, especially for World War I. The conditions were extremely difficult and deadly to many of those troops. Spending months in trenches, but was unable to. And so I drove through a lot of snow, but I would get to the cemetery, and for whatever reason, there would just be ice or a dusting. But yeah, so the conditions are very different, and so you're trying to capture images. The great thing about digital photography is that we get to take images with the incremental image costs nothing in terms of money. It costs time, but not money. So we get to experiment with things, and there's certain techniques that I had. I had envisioned before the process. There's an image from Epinal, which is in the eastern part of France, and it's crunchy footsteps through icy ground. Right, that was always in my mind from even before the day I left for the first trip, that I wanted that image. So. Yeah, so you take a lot of images, and then you rely on those you around you, right? You just like working with any editor, you make your first cut. And I worked with Mary Virginia Swanson and a woman named Joan Lifton, who was a longtime editor. Joan passed away a couple of years ago, and for them to provide their perspective and narrow it even further. And then I guess as a final pass, we had images, and then Alan Ashton of Ashton and Partners out in the Bay Area in California was the designer of the book. An incredible designer and just a great partner. And so when it came down to final cut, that's not going to fit, so we need to get rid of one. Or in our case, we ended up adding a page, which, because of the way books are laid out, we had to add several more pages, and then we had to add a couple more images. Thankfully, I had a couple, not had to, thankfully I had the opportunity to add a couple more images, but that wasn't an easy selection either. So, working with the editors to get it narrowed down, this is going to be the book. And then Alan Ashton, who's a great guy and a wonderful supporter, to actually package the book and make the final cut was really how the process went. It's a long process. I don't have a whole lot of images that are like, this has to be there. Maybe there was a handful that have to be there, and the rest of them, I'm fairly open to that. I'm not, I'm left brain, right brain. As a junior officer, I'm used to being told I'm wrong about things. So, whether it's from my chief or from higher ups in the rank, I'm used to being adaptive. But I think one of the images that really, it was never a question it was going to be in it, was I had a press pass to the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings at Normandy, and I have a 2-page spread where all those World War II veterans that attended are lined up next to each other. Now, there's various posed pictures. This is definitely an unposed picture, but I took a series of images and stacked them together as a panorama, and it goes across 2 pages. I don't know that exists anywhere else. I've looked for it, but that's an image I knew had to be there. It was a monumental experience and a moment in time that had to be documented, and so that was kind of a very easy selection for everybody.
You go through this journey in all the cemeteries and the thousands of images and the work, and the book's complete. Who's the first person who got to see your finished work?
Well, I was supposed to the printer.
Well, after it's printed, before the pre-sale copy, if you will.
Yeah.
Number 0.
The reality is my wife. I was away on a work trip when I worked with a printer in the U.S. It was critical that the book be printed in the U.S. because there are options to print overseas for less cost. This had to be, there was no question, it had to be printed in the United States. Okay. I worked with a wonderful printer out in the Midwest called Warzala, Worzala, and they did a phenomenal job. But it arrived when I was away, and the book arrived. The Warzala sent me the first 20 books in a package before the big shipments, and I was away, and my wife got it. She says, "Well, the books are here. It's ready when you get home." I'm like, "No, open it." I wanted her to open it. She had gone to a couple of trips with me, and she was such a passionate supporter of this project. I was away a lot. It's not inexpensive to travel 8 times to 23 cemeteries. So she saw it, and it was an emotional moment talking to her on the phone. And it was. I couldn't wait to see it when I got home, and it was my wife who saw it for the first time.
Well, let's unpack just a little bit. I mean, a lot of times, marriage is a endeavor fraught with peril, understandably, especially in nowadays. But it's nice hearing where the team, the husband and wife, come together, and whether it's you or her, support was there for you to do this, and you got to share it. That moment with her, that had to be special. Had to be special.
Yeah, no. I mean, it really, really was. As I mentioned, her dad was away a lot when she was a girl, whether on active duty or working the reserve job. So it's when you get to be as high as he was, it's not one weekend a month. It's pretty much every weekend a month. There's something going on. So she was very aware and very supportive of this of this book, and very aware of the sacrifices of families. And so, I mean, I'm blessed, right? I'm lucky to have that. And when I get down, it's like, oh well, how many books did you sell today or this week? Is like, oh, it was a tough week or whatever. She's like, it doesn't matter. You're getting the stories out. People will come. You've done a good. And so it's been a blessing in my life, right? I don't know where I would be without her. But hopefully I won't send her the link to this podcast. But we've been married. Let's see here. I guess it's 28 years, and I can remember because it was just over 28 years ago was the last time I was right about something. So, no, I've told her that joke.
I hope you share this podcast with her. But
I told her that joke before. She thinks she doesn't think it as funny as I do, but she'll laugh at it.
Nice. You go through this investment in time, effort, money, and yourself. You have the book out now. What's next for you? Is there, just another project like this, or are you going in a different direction with your photography now that you've done this?
Well, the book came out in April, and so we have quite a number of books to sell, right? So there's that business challenge, even though it is not really it's a passion project and not a business, but it's you know for me those things are intertwined because I just want to get these stories out in front of as many people as possible, and that's one of the reasons we went back and forth. Giving you kind of a look behind the curtain on pricing. We've kept the pricing below $30 and printed in the United States because this had to be the price point because it had to be accessible to the older veteran who's maybe on a fixed income. It had to be accessible to families. It had to be accessible to people of means. So we've kept the price as low as possible. Where it goes to from here. I mean, I'm doing some upcoming speaking engagements. We're trying to work with corporations and corporate veteran programs. That's what's going on. In terms of the project, I don't know right now. It's kind of new in terms of having the book out. But I love the project. Could it be, a comparison of Punchbowl and Arlington? I don't know. I don't know, but it's been. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But right now, it's about getting these stories into the hands of as many people that's willing to listen to it.
Well, I see the book on Etsy. Is that the only place to purchase the book from? Okay.
That's right. Yeah, it just serves as the front end. The books are here with me as well as we have a warehouse, and so it just really and they've been very helpful to me. It doesn't drive business to my site. There's not Etsy shoppers that are looking for military books, as you might imagine, but it works very well. Amazon just is very difficult to work with for this type of product.
Yeah, I've heard that. You do this, you get it done, you see it now in people's hands. I guess as we wind down, what's the reaction you've gotten from people who've actually, gotten the book from you? And ladies and gentlemen, I'll have the link to the Etsy store and the Oscar Mike Radio website post and show post so you can check it out yourself. I see where the book is $29.50 or $39.50 for a signed copy, and that's a nice price. That's very doable for what it's in it. It's really amazing. But you've done this and you've seen it be in people's hands. What's it like hearing their reaction?
Fulfilling, right? It's an emotional reaction for most people. It's a conversation starter as well, which checks all the boxes for me. I wanted it to be an emotional journey. I wanted to be people to remember the individual. It's not a history book, right? I mean, Ambrose and Keegan and Rick Atkinson, the Pulitzer, they're on the bookshelves behind all of us, and they're incredible, right? But this is a human remembrance. This is a humanist kind of project where we reflect on the individuals who sacrificed and the families, right? There, in some cemeteries, more than 20 sets of brothers. The Tester brothers, 3 brothers, 1943, 44, and 45. Died in sequential years. The 5 Sullivan brothers are on the walls of the missing, which is a fairly well-known story in Manila when their ship was sunk. So it's been an emotional journey, but it's also been a conversation starter, and I think that's important. There's always conversation about my father served, my grandfather served, and that's important as well to keep it alive in the families. And if you have a chance to listen to this podcast or purchase a book, if you can remember one name or one story, then I've done my job, because each of these folks, we tend to, because of the magnitude of the loss. I mean, how do we teach our high school students, it's X million people, or this was the battle of, and we don't remember the names. My effort and my intention here was to have name names and to let you experience the emotion, a bit of the emotion, just a fraction of the emotion of what it must have been like at the time. Many families went months, if not more than a year, without knowing the fate of their son or daughter. They stopped getting letters. They pleaded for information, only to find out later that they were lost in battle. So, very emotional, very emotional.
For sure. So you mentioned, and your website mentions that you do public speaking. If somebody on a military family network with their employer or a private organization wants to reach out to you to engage that, how would they do that, Richard?
Yeah, there's my email is rich.rsphoto. So rich.romeo sierra photo, PHOTO @gmail.com. And yeah, I mean, I love telling these stories. I love having these conversations. And the project's really, to be honest, is added more to my life than I could possibly have envisioned, right? It's changed me, that starting with that conversation in that cab to this journey, it never, if you haven't been to a cemetery, go, right? But be caveat emptor, it will change you. You'll think about it, right? And you think about it at night, or you think about it on a walk with the dog, or and my wife and I keep talking about, when are we going to get back to one of these cemeteries? Because you just, I don't know, you leave a piece of yourself there and you want to go back.
Richard, I really enjoy getting to talk with you. Certainly, this is the kind of show that I like doing with Oscar Mike Radio, and enjoy getting to learn more. And this is the thing, ladies and gentlemen, we can't forget our history. Our World War II veterans are dying, more and more every day. And, Rich, I wish I had gotten to talk to some World War I veterans. I didn't start this soon enough to do that, but those stories are gone now unless we have them written down somewhere. So I just want to thank you for doing, your part to keep these people alive in our memories.
Great. No, and thank you for taking time to chat about it. It means everything to me. I think one of the things that the families I get to talk to, one of their sad points is they feel like, the world's moved on and their family is forgotten. And then fortunately, a project like this or other projects that are done, come along and they know that there's a community out there that really, really do care and care very deeply. And that's been a very warm experience for me to share time with the folks like yourself.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. I will have the link to Richard's website in the Oscar Mike Radio show post, as well as where you can purchase the book. And again, as long as we remember and take time to think about those who have come before us to serve, they'll never be forgotten. Richard, again, I want to thank you for coming on. As we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we are mission in flight.
The biggest fear Gold Star families have, that their child will be forgotten.
We need to never forget freedom wasn't free.
It's the fact that they give us the life we have now. We should remember them and give thanks to them.
If I can be a part of something today that's going to make the surviving family of any of these veterans, these heroes, feel better tomorrow, then it's worth it.
That one wreath symbolizes one family that was able to smile because of the generous donations.
To sponsor a wreath and honor a veteran, visit wreathsacrossamerica.org.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinista One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.